In today's video, we're going to learn how to do this illustration in Photoshop. Let's get started. Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to another video on Photoshop, on architectural representation, on many things. I just want to remind you guys that I have my Patreon page active now. So if you guys want to see this video, this complete full-length video, and you want to have access to the Photoshop PSD file, have access to the PSD files of all of our videos, the majority of them, perhaps all the last ones and full-length videos, you guys can go to our Patreon page now, and by supporting us, you can also have access to all of these files. So I hope you guys like it. If you want to see some specific videos over here on our Patreon page, you guys can also request them over here, and we're having like exclusive conversations over there. So go over there if you want to see more content. If you don't, you can stay here on YouTube. It's perfectly fine. So in today's video, we are going to see how to create an oblique plan illustration in a project, in the Market Plaza project that I did a few years ago. So this project is a project that was a design that I did with a friend of mine from the university. It's not a university project, but it's a professional project that I think it's in construction right now. And well, we did some renders back then, and I wanted to update them because I want to update my portfolio. So I wanted to make an illustration. So first of all, I opened this file in SketchUp. I modeled it in Revit, but I opened it in SketchUp. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to export some clay renderings, some clay base renderings, and they're going to be two renderings, right? So there's going to be a rendering with soft shadows and one with hard shadows. So what we have to do here, it's very important. First, you have to put it in an asymmetric view in a parallel projection in SketchUp. Then when you open your V-Ray settings, remember that your material override option has to be on. Then when you go into your sunlight options, the size of the sunlight has to be more or less like 200, or it has to be a big size. That is for the soft shadows. As soon as you guys have this, you guys can render the image, and then when you want to render it again, for the hard shadows, you just put the sunlight in about 2 to 1. So that's going to give you hard shadows. And we're going to render both of these images and export them. What I also did was I exported the line file. So exported 2D graphic as a PNG file and imported all of this into Photoshop. As soon as I imported them into Photoshop, I scaled them up. I scaled the lines file because it wasn't scaled, and I mixed all of these layers, right? So I put the hard shadows layer on top, and I set that to multiply, and I turned the opacity a lot, down a little bit. I set it to divide, sorry, and I turned the opacity down a little bit so we can have some soft shadows, and it wasn't that high contrast image. Then I imported the line file, and I started erasing or masking out some things that weren't relevant or that was grabbing too much attention in the image, right? So for example, there are some lines that I didn't want, so I erased them. You can erase them or you can mask them out, whichever suits you best. I recommend you mask them out. And then I added an adjustment layer of a black and white adjustment layer, so we don't have that bluish tones. Next, what I was going to do is I was going to paint the end of these columns. Since these columns technically were cut from the whole roof, so you can see them. I just wanted to make the representation of the cut columns, and I also started selecting the floor. So I was going to select this with my render ID, but the render ID didn't export only the floor as an object, so I had to do it manually. So I did this with the lasso tool. You can press L on your keyboard to do it with the lasso tool. Right now I have a tablet, so it's a bit faster, the process. And after I did this, I created a new layer and painted in a different color with the floor, right? So I wanted to have like maybe a live color, maybe a yellow or red, but I didn't really know what color I wanted for my illustrations. So after I did this was more or less like the most important part of the whole video. in my opinion, because it's the part where you choose the colors, where you choose the tone, where you choose what color palette you're gonna have. So I went to a color palette generator website, as you guys can see over here, and I started playing with colors, right? So I locked in the gray and the white that I already had, and the brown that I already had. After you lock these guys out, I changed this one to yellow because I wanted a more live color. And when you press spacebar, this website gives you different options of different color palettes that would work with those colors that you already have, right? So this was the option that was given to me, right? So a very pastel color palette. So I proceeded to coloring everything yellow, and also I wanted to give a little bit of texture to that floor because it was looking like too plain. And I wanted to add some people. So you want to create a new layer, and with the brush tool, remember it has to be scaled. You want to add about 4 to 5 different types of people in your illustration. For those of you guys that don't have these brushes, these are the Show It Better brushes that I found online, and they're for free. They're for free for everyone because I found them for free. So you can go to the link down below to download them. And I colored them white because I wasn't planning on coloring them after. And what I also did was I wanted to add a texture to the floor. So after I added the shadows to many of these people, I just, with a 10% soft opacity brush, black brush, I rapidly added the shadows to all of the people, and it made it look much more interesting. What I also did was I created a new layer, painted it white, and right click on the layer and right click on blending options. So blending options, when you go to pattern overlay, it has different options or different patterns you can overlay the image on that layer. So for example, in this case, I wanted to have some vertical lines overlaid because I think the image is very vertical with different columns. So I wanted to emphasize much more this verticality of the image. So I made some vertical lines with using the blending options tool. And what I also started doing was adding some textures to give the image, a lot of texture, so it doesn't look so plain, right? So many of these textures I downloaded for free on the internet. These textures that you guys are seeing right now are from a page called Spoon Graphics. You can just type Spoon Graphics on your on Google, and you can find them for free. So I started importing different textures and setting them to the mode of multiply, so you can still have the shadows and all the detail underneath of your original image. Next, I wanted to put the text on the image, but I was noticing that there was a lot of white space that wasn't being used and wasn't relevant in the illustration. So I just cropped many of these things out. And I think that was the best step as well, because there was a lot of white space that wasn't necessary for the image. Then I selected a normal, not so showy typography, and with the color palette that the color generator gave us, I started creating the text for our image, right? So I created the text for different areas, for example, the stairs, the Plaza market, the cold area, and the entry plaza. So again, in this I suggest you really be very simple. Don't go with very dramatic typography that calls too much attention. We just want we just want the illustration to be informative and to visually play a role as well in our illustration. So this is the mistake that a majority of us make, is that we think that the text is secondary in our image composition, but the text is also visually there. So you guys also have to plan your text, what size it's going to be, what typography it's going to be, etc., etc., etc. Now, this was more of an artistic touch I added to the image, since I thought it would give it a little bit more life and emphasize the verticality of the image. So what I did was, with a white brush, I just painted some vertical lines that ended up in the columns that were already designed, and it gave the image much more life. And after this, I thought the dark blue wasn't the right color. It was a very serious color, so I went with the other color that the color generator gave me. And I started coloring the frame, the stroke of the outside of the building, and I noticed that maybe the whole outside could be of this color and it would look nice. So I just rapidly painted it to see if it would work, and I thought it did. So I went to my render ID channel, selected everything that was outside of the building. I created a new layer, and with the paint bucket tool, you can press G on your keyboard for your paint bucket tool, color in everything and set that layer to multiply. When you set it to multiply, all the layers underneath are going to also grab relevance in this layer. So as you guys can see here, our colors are looking very interesting, are looking very it's looking like a nice consolidated image. I think what we need is just a little bit more texture, a little bit more a little bit more interest to the image. So I downloaded a grainy texture and I duplicated it by pressing Ctrl J on my keyboard. Then I merged all of these layers and just left the grainy image on the colored parts, meaning the blue part and the yellow part. Once I did this, I also applied a motion blur to the grainy texture, so it would look vertical. So you can just go to filter, motion blur, and put it to 90 degrees. And then I started adding the secondary text, the other text, I mean, that was going to be also informative in the image. So you guys also remember that this text also plays a visual important role in our image. So we don't want to give it less attention, right? Because the text also balances out our image. The information is very relevant, and also the place of the image. So you guys, what I suggest you do is place your text, or place like dummy text, and zoom out and see if it plays a good role. Another thing I also did was stretch out the image so it could be a perfect oblique image. This technique was learned from Alex Hogerfer, where he stretches the image. So you guys, if you were to print this out, it would be more or less in scale, and you can also measure it like a true oblique view. And after this, I just finished adding some textures to the image, and I also added some remainders of the plan in the outside of the image. You can also, at the end, you can press Ctrl U and change the color palette if you want. It gives you different options. So I hope you guys liked this video. Remember that if you want to see the complete 1 hour and 40-minute video and have access to all the Photoshop files, you guys can go to www.patreon.com/showitbetter for access to all of these files. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.